All right, what's going on, everybody? We're starting out on the screen share today because I do want to try to shorten this video compared to yesterday's, but we do have a lot to do. So I'm going to get out of my Zoom file here, and we're going to get started going into your classwork for today. So it'll be April 29th today, which is a Wednesday. Your warm-up was asking you to tell me what the Archbishop of Caracas, that's the head of the Catholic Church in Caracas, which is in Venezuela, claimed the large earthquake that was brought up in your reading provoked or approved. I'm sorry. So what did they believe when this earthquake happened? Okay, and we'll probably touch on that in just a second. But it did lead to Bolivar's downfall in the beginning, and that's where we're going to pick up today. I just want you to know right now, it's the second part of the reading guide. You'll have 20 questions on it, but I'm going to ask that you do the evens. So you'll do 2 through 20, evens only. So 2, 4, 6, 8, up until number 20. Once again, I think it's important you look through the questions. Because when you get a quiz, there might be things that'll double back on that. But I don't want you to be overextending the amount of work that you need to do every night, okay? So don't do more than you need to, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to do that. I think you'll notice on the day before, I'm going to put some extra videos from one of my favorite channels, Extra History. It has like an animated history of Bolivar. There's like an 8-movie series. I think I'm going to put probably 4 on here. If you remember, that's the guy that sounds a lot like Mr. Lamprecht. So you can see if you believe that or not. We haven't been on those videos in a while, but let's head into where we left off yesterday. And this was Bolivar leaving Venezuela for the second time. And now the Spanish king, which if you want to take a look and see where Spain actually is compared to all this, it's right here. The Spanish king, Ferdinand, is back in power. Okay, and Bolivar has had to leave Venezuela now. This is his second time. And the first time it was because him and Miranda were defeated. And the second time, he actually tries to take a small force himself from what we know as Colombia today. At the time, it was known as New Granada, into Venezuela, and he ended up being defeated. So where he ends up in the end is in Haiti. Now, Haiti had recently declared its independence from from France, but they did have one part of their cultural history that is very different compared to Bolivar, and that's that they were a former slave colony, right? In fact, the president of Haiti at the time, Alexandre Pétion, remember they're French-speaking people, that's why his name sounds that way, he was a former slave. And he said to Bolivar, hey, I know you want to go back and take Venezuela, and you want to free all of Spanish-speaking Latin America from the crown's rule. I can appreciate that because that's what my country did to the French people. So I will support you under one condition, Mr. Bolivar. You being the richest person in basically all of Venezuela, you have mines, plantations, and a whole bunch of other businesses that rely on slave labor. So if you promise me, Mr. Bolivar, that you're going to go over to Spanish Latin America and free those slaves, I will give you my support. Now, Bolivar tries to make one attempt to go back. It's a failure. And then he takes another attempt to go back into New Granada, and he ends up being successful. Now, Bolivar comes up with a plan, and he says to himself, look, even though we have a great vision here, the only chance we have to stand up to a power as strong as Spain is to unite all of these former lands of Spanish colonial America and turn them into one force against them. And what ends up happening is he needs to get all 3 of these countries together in order to do that. But the first problem is the Llaneros. Now, your reading talked about the Llaneros yesterday, and the videos that we're going to talk about actually refers to them by a little bit more of a risque name. They called them the Legion of Hell. But what this group of people are is cattle ranchers who are fighting in the beginning on the side of the Spanish crown because they're getting paid. And that force is what caused Bolivar to have to leave last time. They were called that legion. They were receiving that name because what they would do to people when they would fight against them. Whenever they would fight, they would kill every single person on the battlefield that they could, and they would take no prisoners. And people were very, very, very scared of this group of people. And Bolivar knew that if he wanted any chance to take Venezuela back, he was going to have to get those people on his side. Well, for whatever reason, the Spanish started leaving. These Llaneros are the Legion of Hell. They were not getting the support they had before, and they ended up joining Bolivar's side. And it was hugely successful for him. And he ends up being able to take, in the end, his homeland of Venezuela, what he wants the whole time. And he gets what's called Quito at the time. That is now the capital city of the country that we call Ecuador today. Now, in order to have a kingdom strong enough to fight against the Spanish if they come back, Bolivar is going to unite all of these kingdoms into one country and call it Gran Colombia, which is why this area is called Colombia to this day. Now, if you take a look and we go back to this warm-up from Monday, here it is. You see this flag behind the picture of Bolivar and the propaganda, right? And that's where that flag comes from. It's his creation of this state called Gran Colombia. But Bolivar's not done, okay? He's saying to himself, look, I know for a fact that the stronger that we get this former Spanish-speaking Latin America, the more territories we get together and the more we can drive the Spanish out, the better chance we have to keep this independence in the long term. So he starts to continue to expand. And the next place that he really wants to go is here, which is Peru. And it's because Peru probably in all of South America at this point has the strongest presence of the Spanish crown yet, but there's a revolution that's starting with their own people there, and they're starting to openly fight back, and they're looking for somebody to lead them. Well, Bolivar's to the north in Gran Colombia, and he ends up sending a force down through the Andes Mountains in order to take on the Spanish here in Peru. He does it in the middle of July, which you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, Mr. Plog, what a great time to go through the mountains in the middle of July when it's summer and nice and warm. Ladies and gentlemen, as we should know, when you're south of the equator, the seasons are the exact opposite. So rather than it being very warm, this is the coldest of the cold time. Think of it like December or January here in Minnesota. Not good, okay? It was very difficult for his troops to get through there, but they ended up making it, even though some didn't make it all the way there. But there's one thing that comes along with that, and it's the same thing that Hannibal did when he attacked Rome through the Alps. Holy cow, were the Spanish people surprised. When they came out of the mountains, they were nowhere near as prepared as they needed to be because they didn't think there was any chance in heck that anybody would come through the mountains in the middle of the winter. Bolivar is able to take them on, and he quite easily drives all of the Spanish out of Peru, and now he's got Peru on his side. Now, because just to the southeast, I should say, there was another pocket of people that wanted to shake off the Spanish crown. He didn't have to do all so much there, and they ended up joining his empire at the end, and they loved him so much and what he had accomplished that they named their area of this empire Bolivia after him. Now, of course, that's a pretty cool honor to have a whole country named after you while you're still alive, but Bolivar starts to run into a problem. As he continues to expand, he thinks we are going to have a better chance to keep the Spanish out the more powerful we become. But the more powerful that this area becomes, the more he has to take control in order to keep it that way. And what ends up happening is he starts passing lots of laws that are not very popular with people, and they almost are starting to see things resemble what they were beforehand, but instead of having somebody who is Spanish in charge, it is somebody who is a Creole or just one step below the former Spanish royalty, right? So what ends up happening is people get really, really upset with this. And the harder Bolivar tries to hold on, the more he starts to falter. Now, when he was younger, he had something on his side, and that was his charisma. He was a great speaker. People totally could buy into whatever he wanted to talk about because he was so good at getting people to believe what he had to say. The problem is now in the late 1820s, he's starting to get older and he's starting to get sicker, right? When you're in your late 50s at this time, that is an age in which a lot of people start to die of natural causes. And Bolivar gets hit with probably one of the worst diseases that you can get at this time if you're native to this area. And that's because there's so many, like with his wife, the yellow fever, he was immune to that disease. He was not immune, however, to tuberculosis. And he gets tuberculosis and he tries to hold on for quite some time. As he gets physically weaker, he's not able to implement the policies he needs to keep this area together. People start to openly rebel against them because they know he's getting weaker. And eventually, this area is going to break apart and they are going to form their own governments and they are going to break away from Bolivar's ruling tradition. Now, the question for me becomes, was his rule or was his freedom fight a failure? And you could make an argument that it was, right? Because immediately upon his death, we're going to see this grand vision that he had to unite all of Spanish-speaking South America fall apart. But at the same time, the Spanish do not reclaim these territories again, and these places have since been independent. Now, there have been some turmoil here, right? I mean, these countries over time have had some serious shifts in power, some serious, in a lot of cases, civil wars. And in the case of up here, this is current day Panama, we have a lot of people coming in from other areas like the United States that are trying to colonize these areas. So I don't know what to say on the topic, but I will say this, is that none of this would have happened in the speed that it did without somebody who believed in this cause as much as Bolivar and had the intelligence and the wherewithal to try to get it done. And he did not falter in his mission. So for me personally, even though I think he was a flawed person, as all of these great people in history I've talked to you about are, I think there's definitely something to be said that he was highly successful, and it was because of his drive, motivation, and his will to get things done that did it. Ladies and gentlemen, do not forget to get your exit ticket done after this, which is asking you who or perhaps what country did Bolivar want to model his South American vision after. Now, I believe your reading will do this quite a bit, but think about it. You're talking about a former colony that ends up uniting together and then driving its original colony out. And I think we can agree that whether or not he wanted to model it exactly after, that sounds an awful lot like the United States, right? So he wanted to put his own spin on it, but he was hoping that when he drove the Spanish out, he could unite all of these territories together, just like the United States did to the north. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, have yourselves a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be moving to the south, and we will be covering the other part of Spanish-speaking Latin America. Have a wonderful day.